Once you see the reality of the world around you, the facade of your society, the lies you've been told, escapism, even as it pertains to doing normal stuff, is much more difficult. As such, I have had a lot on my mind these last few weeks, and there is this question that is irking me. It's relentless. That is whether or not this endless behemoth struggle is worth it, not just in terms of personal cost. I've been evaluating the quality of what we purport we're preserving. Why are we fighting? What are we preserving? I used to think that we had to preserve American values at all costs, but that isn't really it. I think the attachment I felt for America was really rooted in the larger teachings of Western civilization, not specifically qualities unique to America. And I keep wondering, if we're able to correct the course of America, what will that new nation and the world look like? What will we even make of it if we're successful? What precautions will we take to prevent history from repeating itself, to stop feminism from permeating our culture again, to stop postmodernism from polluting academic environments? Why should we bother to preserve something that we're not adequately prepared to safeguard? And how can we even do that if, as Americans, we have such disparate perspectives about that which is destroying our society? The right correctly identifies the culprit as globalism, open borders, the welfare state, socialism, communism. The left believes that it's inequality and patriarchy. If you've been with me for a while, you've probably received some contradictory messaging. But I'm like most people. Sometimes I feel very confident, like we're destined to triumph. Sometimes I feel like we're destined to be destroyed. And sometimes I feel that we're destined to struggle indefinitely. I love America, I truly do. But if I'm being totally honest, I think that my last several weeks of fretting is a manifestation of the faith that I've lost in the American experiment. I was very hopeful at the beginning of Trump's presidency, but now that I'm not seeing immigration issues being resolved, that there seems to be virtually no consequence for straight up treason, I see how corruptible our government and system truly are. Not to mention, if popular culture is any reflection of the quality of our society, we're totally screwed. Like so many people, I've fled various cities and retreated inland. The juxtaposition between conservative towns and liberal cities could not be more stark. And reflecting on these differences has really exposed the nature of democracy to me. I know we're a constitutional republic, but the same applies. If citizens lose vested interest in upholding their cultural values, if they're corrupted by monetary incentives, or if the population becomes even a sizable minority foreign-born, those that rely on the state will always vote to strip resources from those that do not, always. Maybe I just have a problem with the welfare state, but I'm at a real crossroads here. If we continue to allow our values to be tarnished by modernity, by consumption, by reliance on the state, if we freely give up our sovereignty to accommodate foreigners that have no vested interest in maintaining the culture, even if we do not do this voluntarily, but we have a state that allows it to happen against the will of the majority, is it worth saving? I know this is binary thinking, but I do believe that right now, when we're in the midst of this power struggle and have an opportunity to purge neocons and socialists from the government, we have to have a firm, long-term plan of action. So many past revolutions have been dismal failures because overthrowing the status quo requires such a Herculean effort that by the time a victory is achieved, the momentum has often been totally depleted. I fear that that is going to happen or is already happening, and historically, this is when authoritarianism, which offers to replace chaos with stability, has an opportunity to take hold. I made a video a while back about the FBI and FISA abuses. I've linked this below. I was skeptical that the truth would come out in a timely manner, but I remember making this video and feeling a sense of triumph, of the inevitability that the truth would come down on these corrupt government institutions and these evil politicians and FBI agents like a hammer. I was certain. I even remember getting mad at Matt Christensen for telling me to temper my expectations. I did not want to hear it, but he was totally right. Here we are, December 2018, and we're still in the midst of the Russia investigation. Nothing has happened, and despite the abundance of evidence that the Clinton campaign, neocons, and progressives have utilized every tool in our system to perpetrate the most massive hoax in American history in order to overthrow a duly elected president, we don't seem any closer to this great cleanse that I swear to God I could almost taste. As a result, I feel totally burned out. I feel betrayed that I fought for a system that has revealed itself so broken, so plainly unscrupulous. Like our Constitution, like our principles and values are the ultimate law of the land for those of us that are earnest, but our obstacles at best and at worst are tools of destruction for the remainder of society. Not to mention that the left claims to believe that Russia, whose economy is smaller than that of Texas, has managed to dictate the results of a democratic election of the nation with the world's largest GDP. I don't see any leftists looking at this critically and going, hey, if that happened, our nation must be disenfranchised, right? They know this is preposterous, that we're not at the level of a third world nation, which is how I know that they're lying. They don't believe this shit. It's clearly a means to an end. Initially, a method to influence the election, and if elected, a path for impeachment. It's so transparent. I also made a video a few months back called Keeping the Country Together, Should We? In it, I explore the concept of balkanization, even the necessity of it, although it pains me to merely suggest this. I'm really beginning to believe that at this juncture, right now, when we still have a shot, as small as it may be, to become a principled moral society again, we must decide if we regain the power, what elements of this broken society will we choose to adopt and enforce? When I look at liberal cities, when I hear leftists talk about a borderless society, about instituting socialism, about a complete cultural upheaval, about the evil of white Western history, it just deepens this fear of balkanization. Our worldviews are irreconcilable. How can we coexist with those that refuse to accept our most fundamental tenets merely as basic framework? I used to talk a lot about how Europe is in deeper trouble than we are. Don't get me wrong, they have huge problems, many of the same that we're experiencing. But despite the power of the EU, they do ultimately have the option to uphold their sovereignty and protect their cultures. I'm very encouraged by the behavior of Hungarians and the Polish, and France has had a hell of a few weeks. The middle class is clearly furious that they're funding the lifestyle of migrants at the expense of those that are actually French. They're done with the consequences of globalism and they're burning it down. It shows that at least in France, they've begun a revolution and they have some institutional power on their side. Those that realize that France must be preserved at all costs.
Meanwhile, you have the nationalist Yellow Vests who are making their demands clear and successfully getting police and firefighters to defect to support their movement. The Yellow Vests have an overwhelming 80+% approval rating with the French public, and the police are going to their side. Here you can see the police taking off their helmet, showing solidarity with the Yellow Vest.
But in the United States, we don't have a millennia of tradition to look upon to remind us of that we share with one another. Instead, we have the idea of freedom, the belief in liberty. We have the Constitution to guide us, but a large percentage of our populace whose minds have been polluted by government schools either do not know of or do not believe in its legitimacy. Is that really enough to bind people together, to make them feel as though their religion, their race, their individuality pales in comparison? I used to think, yes, of course, because that's how important it is to me. Freedom will always endure. In our hearts, all of us believe that, right? Even deep into the first few years of my channel, I really believed this. And trust me, I still want to believe. I want to believe that we can all value liberty and justice above the more superficial characteristics of our identity. But when I look around the world, examine other cultures, and evaluate the warring factions within our own, it seems very clear to me that ideology rarely reigns. Our Constitution is not binding Americans to one another, particularly when there's such a monumental effort to subvert our founding principles. I always advise people to invest in their local community, to live in places where they feel welcome, where they feel useful, where they want to invest and cultivate infrastructure and relationships because they have a sense of duty, loyalty, pride. In such communities, you can develop something that feels autonomous. They're often safe, close knit, clean, well cared for. Idyllic, beautiful communities like this exist in these little pockets all over the country, and I believe still are the bedrock of the nation. But how do we protect these communities? It's commonplace now for these areas to experience a rapid influx of liberals fleeing cities like Seattle, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. They're in search of a better life, and leftists lack self awareness. They never make the connection between the institution of their own idiotic policies and the destruction of these communities. Perhaps I'm being naive and they do see such a connection, but they're just trying to turn red states blue. Or perhaps even this is naive, and leftists are so filled with malice and spite for Western civilization that they see these communities as a threat and swarm on them like the locusts that they are, merely for the sport of destroying them. I don't know. What I do know is that this phenomenon is widespread, and because the leftist paradigm has been so widely adopted culturally and in government, stable communities have no way, outside of social ostracizing, to retain the tenor of their own towns. And leftists often lack a sense of shame, so ostracizing them isn't going to be that effective anyway. Inevitably, leftists ruin these beautiful towns as well, and the conservative citizens continue to retreat inland. But where does it end? We're just going to keep getting run out of our towns, our local governments flipping ever so slowly as positions get handed over to a new wave of millennial socialists. We can't run forever, and we're already running out of places to go. I just realized that I have not posed any solutions here, merely contradicted several of my previous videos while offering no hope for the future. Sorry, guys. That is where you come in and my wonderful comment section comes in. We need a game plan. How do we survive this era, retain the good parts of our government, of our civilization, while ousting those that want to destroy it, while abandoning the parts of our system that allowed this takeover to happen in the first place? While protecting the communities that, at least for a short while more, are the heartbeat of this nation. Is there anything we can do to save it? I'm really sorry if this was a bit of a black pill. Maybe I'm just internalizing this new winter gloom. But I don't know how to fix this, and I refuse to feel like it's all hopeless and like we should just give up. Western civilization has brought more good and prosperity to the world than any other in the history of mankind, and I really feel like we're obligated to fight for it. Let me know what you think in the comments section. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you soon. Bye.